We have today fundamental rights. Uh, it is interesting to know that how fundamental right is different from any other legal rights. Right. See, even if there were no fundamental right, let's imagine the scenario that what if there was no fundamental right, because not every country in the world has fundamental right, as India, USA, and Britain, Russia, and some countries had it. Australia, some countries had, but not every country had the fundamental right. So, what about them? How does it operates, and what difference that does it plays? So, of course, you see, when fundamental right is guaranteed by the supreme body, which is constitution. In the scenario of India, it is constitution of India is the supreme body, right? In USA, it is executive, which is president is the supreme body. So when supreme body guarantees you that whosoever violates this particular right, we have 6 fundamental right? We'll be discussing in detail after some slides. So the Constitution of India promises that whosoever violates this right, the Supreme Court is going to punish them, and not only that, it guarantees you that he along with you will fight for your justice, right? It will not only fight for this basic right which is guaranteed by the Constitution itself, but it will also keep a check on arbitrariness, unreasonableness, and uncertainty. We will discuss about arbitrariness, unreasonableness, and uncertainty in Article 14, because they are the part of they have been made the part of Article 14 in the judgment of EP Roepa, right? We'll be discussing it. Don't worry for that. So let us talk about evolutionary phase of the fundamental right. We had traces that even before the enactment of the Constitution, or let's say even before the government came into function, like in ancient India, we had traces that there were certain rights and there were certain obligations that states were required to do, right? In the Mauryan administration, particularly in Chandragupta Maurya, we find that we find through the textbook of Kautilya, which is also known as Chanakya, that Chanakya says or writes in his book that the king shall belong with people, and he shall spend some time with people to know them well and to work for their welfare. So these are the lines, these are the exact lines which were there in the book of Chanakya. So what difference does it make? The book of Chanakya was not a binding authority; it was merely an ethical code, right? So, in an ethical sense, that was of course right. Kings should do X, Y, Z, but if that is not a binding authority, which means that king can, if king violates the provisions that is there in the ethical code, there will be no compensation, or there is no provision for that, right? The first traces of evolution of fundamental right was can be seen in Magna Carta, which came into agreement in 1215. Which we see he is the person sitting in the chair is King John, and he made the agreement with people of England that there are certain rights that king should not violate. Whosoever will be the king of England, they shall not violate the rights provided in the Magna Carta. Some of the basic right that was provided in the Magna Carta was that if there is arrest, it should be according to the procedure established by the king. No arrest should be made arbitrary, and the king should follow certain laws which he or she has already declared through several whatever king says becomes the law. So whatever becomes the law, king has to follow that. King cannot do arbitrary actions anytime and anywhere he or she wants, right? Next, of course, there was many other development like Russian Revolution. We'll read it further in the slide, and French Revolution. We'll also read that. We'll go through the brief of it. We're talking about American Revolution. After the American Revolution, when America got independence on the 4th July 1776, we see that America became the first country to enact the Constitution. America became the first country to enact the written constitution. Before that, there was constitution, like Britain has a constitution, but there is no written constitution. What does word written constitution means? That all the laws which is there in the constitution is not compiled in one particular book, but they are in the form of amendments, and they are in the form of several laws, right? So the first written constitution was done by United States of America, and it was also the first state to enact preamble before the enactment of the constitution. Though the constitution was enacted, but there was no provisions that could stop a state from doing something. Like there was provision in the constitution that enables executive body, which is president, to do something for the welfare of its state, but there was nothing to stop him from doing certain things. Thomas Jefferson, which was then the founding member of the Constitution of United States, has mentioned this before the parliament, and said that there should be certain rights called fundamental right, and those rights will be, are guaranteed through Bill of Right. And we'll see that the Bill of Right will come in several amendments, like the first constitutional amendment to 14th constitutional amendment. There are certain rights that will be guaranteed throughout the period, right? So yes, this is deputation. In the Indian scenario, we see that it was Annie Besant through the Commonwealth of India Bill 1925 who first propounded the concept of fundamental rights, right? So there was 7 fundamental rights propounded by Annie Besant. You don't need to actually worry about it. You don't have to memorize it. But if you see the certain words like individual liberty, keep note of the word liberty, freedom of conscience, right? When you will read Article 25 and 26, will get mention of this word. So just remember this word. Free expression of opinion, Article 19. Freedom of assembly, Article 19. Non-discrimination on ground of sex, Article 15(1). Free elementary education, which was not there in the Constitution but later came in Article 21A through amendment, right? And also through the Unni Krishnan case, which was promoted by Supreme Court of India. Free use of public space, again, Article 15, Clause 3, right? So, and about liberty, we have this in preamble of the Constitution of India. So she was the first lady, and this was the first bill which was introduced before the Parliament, the then Parliament, in British India, which did ask for certain fundamental right. Later to the time came Nehru report, Motilal Nehru, who was father of Jawaharlal Nehru. He propounded certain principle and certain objective of the Constitution, and he also established that there shall be certain rights that states should not violate. Those rights were again enumerated in the objective resolution, which we'll see that was propounded by Jawaharlal Nehru in the Constituent Assembly on 1948, and later that will know as Preamble of the Constitution. So our fundamental right, of course, apart from getting influence from Australia, Japan, Russia, USA, Britain, our constitution was also influenced by the international happenings like Universal Declaration of Human Rights. When you will see that there are certain provisions of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we will also find those provisions in the constitution itself. Right? After India got independence, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was given an opportunity, or let's say responsibility, to be the head of advisory committee of fundamental rights, and he did his task so well. That even today, when we look for the justice, we look for fundamental right. Article 13 of Constitution of India. We will deliver a separate lecture on Article 13 of Constitution of India, which talks about law inconsistent with or in derogation with fundamental rights. Right? The topic is very lengthy, and it will separately take approximately 45 minutes. So we'll not discuss it. Of course, if we want, we can go through it. in 5 or 10 minutes, but that will not be good for competitive points of view, examination point of view, and also it will stop you from getting benefits of certain concept that has enumerated in Supreme Court from long period of time. Like we'll see the case Vikaji versus State of Madhya Pradesh. We'll see the case RMDC versus Union of India. Those were the case that incorporate the philosophy which was there in our constitution and from several other constitutions and development in several other international scenario. So to read in one go, like 5 or 10 minutes, won't be good for understanding. We'll be dealing this in separate class after the end of fundamental right. So of course we have 6 fundamental right, and right to property was also a fundamental right, but it was repealed and now it is a legal right. So have you discussed difference between legal right and fundamental right? See, legal right are the right that is guaranteed by any other statute, right? Even the constitution itself, like right to property, has the constitutional status, but is not the fundamental right. What is difference that when the state infringes this fundamental right, you can directly approach the Supreme Court under Article 32 and High Court under Article 2 to 6, and also state cannot infringe your fundamental right on the regular basis or from any other order or any other act or ordinance. It has to pass an amendment, and that is the special amendment which shall be passed if the state want to touch the fundamental right. And if the state is doing so, even if the state is passing the fundamental right amendment, it has to abide by that, right? So there are certain right that is only for the citizen of India. If you have pen and pencil or paper, please mention it that Article 15, 16, Article 18, Clause 2, Article 19, 1, A, B, C, and all, and Article 29 and Article 13. We will read all of these articles in great details. You don't have to worry about that. But just mention it somewhere that these are the articles which are especially guaranteed to only citizen of India, right? Right to equality, Article 14 to 18, right to freedom, Article 19, right against exploitation, Article 20, right to freedom of religion, Article 25 to 28, cultural and educational right, Article 29 and 30, of course, and right to constitutional remedies, Article 32. Again, we have right to life and personal liberty, Article 21. We'll read it. We'll read it all in great detail, so you don't have to worry about it here. In this particular lecture, we'll be going through Article 14 to Article 18. So before we go and understand the basic provision in Article 14, let us understand the concept of equality. See, equality is something beyond what is there in the bare act and what is there in the theory. Supreme Court in Secretary versus State, Haryana State Electricity Board versus Suresh, 1999. I am reading this line of Supreme Court for you. If this is visual at your end, please do read it or mention it somewhere. Also, the document will be available on the website. So if you want, you can download it from there. Don't have to worry about that. The court observed that equality clause in Constitution does not speak mere of formal equality before law, but embodies the concept of real and substantive equality, which strikes the inequalities arising on account of vast social economic differentiation and is thus consequently on the essential ingredient of social and economic justice. See, what is real and substantive equality? See, so by this, what Supreme Court wants to say that equality should not merely be in word, but in real sense, And substantive equality means equality when read together with social and economic justice. What social and economic justice means? For this, you have to read the entire constitutional debate of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, the great learner, and the one who has written the constitution, right? So, social justice means that there are different sections in the society. Some has lower status, some has upper status, some are privileged, some are underprivileged, right? There is equality, inequality, and that is the social inequality. What social justice attempts to seek is equality, like every section of society is equal, and they form and there is such policy that uplifts all of them together, right? What economic justice means? See, economic justice is a hypothesis. It cannot be practiced in real sense. This is the word of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, who says that economic justice is mere hypothesis. It cannot be no practiced because. But Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi talks about economic justice, and he is in favor of economic justice. He wanted that India should achieve economic justice. See, what economic justice means that if we truly implement the concept of economic justice in its true sense, we will lead to the communism form of government. But in India, we see a socialist form of government, and now we are more over in between socialist and capitalist. We can call out ourselves as a mixed economy. So I hope you have already understood that what is economic justice. Everyone in whatever country you name it, USA, UK, or anything, any country will see that there are certain section of society, like 10% at max, who has entire resources of 90%, and there are 90% of population who has only 10% of resources. This is economic disparity, right? Bringing them in between is economic justice. We have other very important case with us, E.P. Royappa versus State of Tamil Nadu. I have already mentioned it. See, in this case, am I going too fast? Hello, everyone.
No,
Am I
sir.
going too fast?
No, sir. No, sir.
No, sir.
All right. I'm sorry for the video thing because, of course, I can understand that this was meant to be an interactive section where we could see each other and we could interact. But I don't know what is the technical fault, and I'm not good in technicalities. So, no, leave that. We'll concentrate on the topic. And in next session, of course, I promise that this will not happen. So, yes, E.P. Royappa versus State of Tamil Nadu. In this case, there was an IS officer, right, who did held the post of chief secretary. He had certain, of course, that was E.P. Royappa. He was the IS officer. So what happens that he had certain conflict with the government in power, right? And he was removed from his post and made deputy chairman. And then again he was removed from his post and given lower post than the deputy chairman. Again he was removed from the post and given lower post than what he held. Don't you think this is derogatory to not only to the E.P. Royappa but the provisions of the entire constitution? Because we see when we read Article 14, we'll see that there are lots of the state promise to fight against arbitrariness, to fight against unreasonableness, to fight against uncertainty. And what happened in here, don't you think that this was fully the leading example of uncertainty and arbitrary form of government? Supreme Court in this particular case held that, again I am reading line by line the ratio of Supreme Court because that is important, and if you quote this in your examination paper, let's say of UPSC or PCSJ or any other examination paper, you will gain a good marks than you would have otherwise, right? So if you want, you can note it down. Otherwise, you will have this PPT. Equality is a dynamic concept. It cannot be cabined and confined within traditional doctrinal limits. From the positive point of view, equality is antithetic to arbitrariness. Where an act is arbitrary, it is implicit in that it is unequal both according to political logic and constitutional law, and is therefore violative of Article 14. You see, now I will read Article 14 for you. Of course, we'll come back to it because this is, this is a quite difficult statement for law fresh student. But of course, this is the common word for advocates. If some of you are advocate here, you might smile that these are the word go through on daily basis. But these are quite difficult word for advocate for law students. So I'll read Article 14 for you and explain this in great details. So here is Article 14. Comprised of 23 words. Just 23 words. Can you imagine that these 23 words were re-researched many a times, that there are more than 100 books written on these particular words, 23 words. Entire civilization, entire revolution took place based on these particular words. We see American Revolution based on this particular law, equal protection of laws, right? We see, we have already seen Magna Carta, and we'll see in further development that the revolution in UK took place on this based on these words, equality before law. The state, we have already explained in Article 12. If you want to go through that, there, Visu, please drop the link of last lecture in the comment box. And if you are on YouTube, all the links will be available in the description column, right? So the state, we have described it in Article 12. State shall not deny. Shall not deny. Of course, the entire Article 14 is a negative concept which prohibits a state from doing certain things. Any person. Word any person means that either it is citizen of India or foreigner. If he is in territory of India, right, the protection of Article 14 will be given to him or her. Equality before law. Of course, we will discuss this in great detail. Equal protection of laws. We'll also discuss this in great detail in the next slide. Right. So this is how we read Bare Act. If you are reading Bare Act, you must check out each and every word, that what this word wants to say. Right. Even the verb has its own meaning. Right. And if there is any particular word that has some meaning, when you are reading the Bare Act, go in great details so as to understand the concept of it. See, no examination, they will ask that please write what is there in Article 14, the bare provisions of it. Nowhere they will ask that. What will be asked will be a theoretical portion or analytical portion. And for that, you need to go in great details and understand the basic concept. Right? So we have seen the two very important words, equality before law and equal protection of law. Right. Equal protection of law is the concept from 14th Constitutional Amendment of USA, and equality before law is the concept of UK, then England, A.B. Dicey. This person has explained the word equality and the system, the government, the governance system in Britain follows the concept of A.B. Dicey, right? So he explains the equality in three terms: absolute supremacy of law, equality before law, and predominance of legal spirit. I hope you might have heard this word several times, but now we'll go into details and we'll see that what this word actually means. Right? Absolute supremacy of law. What does this mean? Assume that you are not in a democratic setup. Assume that you are in a monarchical system of government where king has all the power. So when we are talking about this monarch, we are talking about either we are talking about ancient India or medieval India in the context of India, and in the context of world history, we are talking about pre-liberalization and pre-urbanization, right? So in the context of India, we are talking about ancient India and medieval India. King draws its power from religion, right? And whatever power it draws from religion formulates into a policy, and that policy becomes law, right? So even in like we have the policy of Jizya implemented by Alauddin Khalji, and we have several policy of Dharma Shastra by this Asok. So there was law. See, even if there will be no government, whosoever will be in authority will formulate a policy, and that policy, if has power of sovereign body, will become a law, right? So law is nothing but what comes from the sovereign body and becomes an authority on its subject. Like subjects means not political science. Subject means we the people, right? So this is the law. If we ask or try to understand that what legal status or what status does law has in those times, then we'll see that law can be violated, or law can be removed, or whatever kings want, or the religion. In let's say we are talking about, if you are talking about Firoz Shah Tughlaq, in Firoz Shah Tughlaq it was a theoretical theological form of government, which means that religion was supreme and king was inferior to religion. If we talk about other governments like Akbar in the medieval India, we'll see that the king was supreme and religion was inferior to the king. So we have this will keep on changing. What we want to convey is that what legal status does law has in those times. We see that it depends upon the mercy of king, and law can be molded according to the wish and wants of king, right? There was no supremacy of law, but the supremacy of king. What this particular that was called as, in those time it was called as rex lex, because king has divine authority and it could do whatever they want. This particular concept, absolute supremacy of law, says that whatever will be the law and howsoever the law is made, like whatever will be the law will be the supreme authority, and even king or the religious affair or any other body functioning under the state, in the state, sorry, will follow the law, and law will command them. In the context of India, Constitution of India is the law of the land, and Constitution of India has supreme authority. All other laws, all other statutes, all other organs belongs to and answerable to Constitution of India. And who has written Constitution of India? If you'll please tell me who has written Constitution of India?
Constitution Assembly, sir.
When you will read the preamble of Constitution of India, it says that we,
We the people.
yeah, that's right, we the people of India, I, you, and our ancestor has written this constitution, which means that we are the sovereign body and constitution is the supreme body, because we the sovereign body has given constitution the supreme authority. Now you understood? This concept takes year and long to be understood. It's okay if you didn't understand that. You may ask a question on it, that please explain it again, because I can understand that when I was a law student, it took me entire semester to understand what is sovereignty and how it is it keeps on changing with time, and how law gets molded with sovereignty. So is it clear?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the second concept of evidence talk about equality before law. So equality before law has a positive meaning and negative meaning as well, right? If you see that, first of all, let's imagine two situations. Let's imagine a situation where everyone is equal in the country. There is a country, right? And everyone is equal in this country. So, as this concept says that everyone shall be equal before law, means whosoever the person is, whether that person is judge of Supreme Court, that person is poor, any other class of society. We are understanding this concept that by assuming that everyone is equal, right? So whosoever the person is, law will apply equally on everyone, right? But that is not the scenario. Not everyone in India is equal, and even if I will ask that, please name me a country where everyone is equal, that is impossible to say. Not even in the then USSR. USSR, equality is a concept which our constitution tries to achieve. Like it is a goal where we want to go. It is not a state where we are living, right? So not everyone in the society is equal, and it cannot be. There will be inequality, let's say based on economical equality, let's say based on social inequality, or any other form of inequality. What this concept says that howsoever the body means howsoever the person is, and whosoever the person is, the law will apply equally on both. Let's say a a has a very good reputation in the society, and he has brutally murdered B, right? But he has very good reputation in society, and he is let's say the richest person in his city. C is a taxi driver, comparatively poor, and he has also brutally murdered B. So if there is a law encoded, for now there is the concept of rarest of the rare case, and that depends upon many other circumstances. So we'll not go there. But I'm just assuming that if there is a law encoded in IPC, that if this happens, if anyone brutally murders someone, then he shall be hanged. If this is the line in the constitution, let's imagine there is no line in constitution saying this particular word. So let's imagine that if that is in the IPC. So if A has brutally murdered B, and he is the reputed and richest person in the city, and C has also brutally murdered B, and he is comparatively poor. If there is a law saying that they will be hanged, they shall be hanged, right? Because they are equal before the law. You can imagine anyone in these two segments, like anyone can be A, either he is richest or the poorest, or anyone can be in the C box C, except president and governor. There are certain if you talk about Constitution of India, there are certain exceptions to it. Like if you talk about Article 361, if you talk about Article 31C, so there are certain exceptions to it. We'll go through it. We'll go through in the next slide. Don't worry for that. So yes, everyone is equal before the law. Got it?
Yes,
The
sir.
next concept we have with us is predominance of legal spirit. This is very important concept, and once I'll understand it in very clear terms, let's say Supreme Court Supreme Court draws its power from Article 32 when you are talking about fundamental right, and generally it draws its power from Article 141 and Article 136, right? So I'm talking about the procedural power, right? So let's say Supreme Court has passed some law, right? Supreme Court has passed some law, and the law is against the some bureaucrats, right? Bureaucrat has certain power, and he knows certain ministers. He knows certain minister, and he can influence the entire his entire city. I mean, if he is arrested, there could be revolt in his city. He can manage to do so. And while I'm explaining this, you can also imagine the scenario in Jammu and Kashmir, right? So the Supreme Court has passed certain law, irrespective of who this person B knows, minister or prime minister or whosoever he knows, and what sort of power he has in the society, and what sort of influence he can make in the society. If Supreme Court has ordered the police to arrest Mr. B, it shall be done at any cost. It shall be done at any cost, irrespective of whatever is the circumstances. Right? So yes, this is the predominance of legal spirit. I hope you have understood. Right?
Right, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will come to Article this 14th Constitutional Amendment. Give me some time. Give me just 2 minutes. All right. So we are talking about Article 14. 14th Constitutional Amendment of USA. There was a word here. There was a line here, which is I don't think that it is readable, but you can note in your if you're making a notebook, note it there. Equal protection of law. Very simple. If you have read the provisions of this Article 14, you see that there is a word, equal protection of laws. This word has been taken from the 14th Amendment of USA. Right. What does this mean? We have already discussed that even if the country is rich, right? Even if the country is rich or poor, or whatsoever scenario we can imagine, imagine USSR where everyone was said to be equal. Even you may imagine in China, a kind of communist form of government. Whatsoever country you imagine, you will see there will always be an instance of inequality, right? There will always be an instance of this is merely a picture. This is merely a picture to represent you the form of social inequalities, economical inequalities, and so on. What this concept promises that if there are certain society which need upliftment, suppose that equality is our goal, it is actually our goal. You don't have to suppose this. This is the goal of our constitution, and this is the line that state wants that everyone should reach at least this line, right, to enjoy the benefits and laws made by state, right? Suppose the person A is above the line, and about the line, this is not merely hypothesis line. You will read about this line in the case Indra Sawhney versus Union of India, right? Uh, okay, before I will go ahead, let me explain the concept of the line I'm talking about, because that will be a vague explanation. Suppose that there are 10 sections in the society, right? Will not name the caste, will not name the section. We just imagine that there is A, B, and C, right? We will talk about we will scale them based on their economic status, their educational status, their social status, their whether they have means of livelihood. Like we will make certain classification and we'll scale them based on this. Suppose that, and everyone will get 2 marks on each category. Suppose that we are talking about 100 marks in total. No, let's say we are talking about 10 marks in total, right? Person A gets, or the community A gets 8 marks. Community Z gets 2 marks. Community C gets, suppose, 6.5 marks. Community D gets, suppose, 3.5 marks. And their average is approx, let's say 6.1 is the average, right? So if we see, person A has 8 marks and it is above the average, right? And this 10 marks is the equality. This is our goal where one should reach, right? Person Z has 2 marks, right? So you see there is huge disparity, there is huge difference between the status of A and B. For the individual, on the individual basis, A may have different approach to the laws made by the sovereign body. The same sovereign body Z has elected, right? And Z may have different approach to the laws made by the same sovereign body A has elected. So 6.1 is the average that state wants everyone to achieve, right? What state will do, that state will make certain laws, be it the laws for upliftment, like we have for women and children. There are several laws for upliftment of women and children. Let's say laws for reservation, like we have certain laws for reservation for OBC, other backward caste, other backward class, scheduled tribe and scheduled caste. So what state will do, that state will make certain law to bring them on same parameter with everyone, so that everyone can enjoy these everyone can enjoy the rights and the laws made by state, so that everyone can be happy, right? Why we are talking about happiness of every one individual? There may be a scenario that we can the state may exploit the downtrodden and weaker section of the society. That can be the scenario, and that has already been happening in several states. Like if we talk about Lebanon, if we talk about Syria, let's not talk about Syria. There is many other different scenarios also. But if we talk about Lebanon, we'll see that there are lots of exploitation on the part of state. State could do so. State could have done so in India as well. Why it is not? Why it has adopted this particular concept? See, there can be two bases. One is philosophical. So one is philosophical. Is this working? I hope it is.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, thank you. So let's say one is philosophical basis. Philosophical basis means that we want ideal society that where everyone is equal, right? See, everyone is equal. That is that won't be possible. But that is an ideal situation where you want to go, right? Second is that if you have read about Russian Revolution, you must have seen that there was huge disparity between few classes of society that at that particular time. I am talking about 1915, right? At that particular time, before during the World War, and even before the World War, when I talk about 1890 in Russia, we'll see that the king in there was known as Tsar, and uh, they and their community, their group of people, has almost 90% of resources of the people, and rest 10%, sorry, rest 90% has only 10% of resources. So that is where the Karl Marx in United Kingdom has written the books on his Marxist philosophy, and you'll see later in the state that that particular law improvised in Russia and became the foundation of Russian Revolution, where the downtrodden section of society fought for their right, and they claimed the entire resources and distributed among themselves so as to govern themselves. Imagine the scenario of India, where India was independent, 75% of Indian population. Some textbooks says that 80% of Indian population was engaged in agriculture. Is that right? Which also means that 45% was our poverty rate. Though this is not a public data. Public data don't didn't talk about more than 37 or 38% to make it an ideal situation. But if you'll really imagine the scenario, you'll get more than 45% of our population was below poverty line. Why? Because there was a lot of exploitation from the British India government, and they were left with nothing but an empty plate. Because they were Jamidar when India got independence, Jamidars got independence, though abolition of Jamidari right came into place, but that didn't work well, and several of the problem came into being. So of course, I'm not going into more details because I could not, in the topic, because this is, of course, when you talk about the constitution, this become very lengthy and very interesting topic. Uh, it seems that let's talk more about it, but of course, we have to be in the syllabus also. But what I am telling you is to understand the scenario so that you may never forget it. So when talk about India, there was 80% of population engaged in agriculture and approx 45%. Even if you talk about the government data, 30 to 38% of the population was poor. If there were no law for upliftment of this section of society, what would have happened? Do you think that Indian constitution would have been successful? Do you think even
No, sir.
yes, right? Even what US president mentioned before us, that those are the constitution of fools, and with a period of time, let's say within 10 years, the entire country will face several revolt. None of the developed country at that particular time believed in India, that India could be a successful democracy. And it is very proud to say that now India is the biggest democracy in the world with the largest constitution in the world. Thanks to our constitution makers, thanks to the debates in Constitution Assembly, thanks to the acceptance, thanks to the principle of tolerance followed at that particular time, when they were not fighting with each other, but were helping in making the greatest constitution of the world. Now we see that, India, imagine, I know I'm not good in drawing, writing as well. I don't know about teaching. So this is India, right? It could be China. Here we can imagine Pakistan. Of course, this part can be Bangladesh. This is China. This is Pakistan. This is Afghanistan, right? Here we can imagine Russia, and somewhere here we can imagine Mongolia, right? Why I'm telling you this? I know the map is not clear, but why I'm telling you this? If you'll see the success rate of democracy and the success rate of constitution in these particular countries, of course Nepal also, so and Bhutan. So if you see the success rate of democracy, republic, and the constitution itself, only India. I'm telling you again, if you want, you can Google it, discuss with your colleagues, discuss with your teachers, that only India is a successful democratic country amongst its nation, amongst its neighbors. China is not a democratic country. Russia has never been a democratic country. Mongolia, of course, there has been several ups and downs. Uzbekistan, there has been several ups and downs. Afghanistan, we know that what is scenario is there in Afghanistan. It is yet to be a successful democracy. Pakistan, we know that it is not a good example of successful democracy. Bangladesh has was formed in 1971, so it is a child of us, and yet there was revolt and there was uprising. So we'll talk about, even we'll talk about, and we'll extend the scenario like Singapore, Malaysia, and we will talk about Sri Lanka. No country except India has been a successful democracy. Why? This particular concept, the credit goes to Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, who has fought for this particular concept. Credit goes to Jawaharlal Nehru, who always wanted to establish socialist form of government. Credit goes to Mahatma Gandhi, who always wanted economic justice, social justice, and fought for Harijan class. Credit goes to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who has enumerated fundamental right in such a way that till date, when we think of justice, we think of fundamental right. So I think you have understood the importance of this three word, equal protection of law. And I think you have understood that how these three words had played a role in saving entire constitution of India or the structure of India. I have read a constitution many a times, but I have never seen that someone has explained me this way. And believe me, if I am doing this for you, you shall mention it somewhere. The concept I am talking about, you should note it down, because of course this will not be only beneficial for your competitive exams. I am sure that will be beneficial for competitive exams, but it will also be beneficial for you in the near future. You must know the concept, right? Anyway, now we'll discuss Article 15. This is 656. All right. So please tell me that whether you want me to discuss this concept, you want me to go further and discuss this concept, or shall we schedule next class? So not audible. Can you tell me that whether shall we proceed or we should look for next class?
Sir, ready, sir. I'm ready, sir.
Ready? Everyone is ready? Everyone is ready? Shall we go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Thank you. See, what happens that this is a very monotonous world. In this Corona time, we are at one pin, and I'm unable to see you, and I'm unable to communicate with you. Talking over a screen is very sometimes it becomes depressing that you can't talk to anyone, you can't see anyone, and yet you're just talking to some maybe a wall, maybe a tab. So it is very important for us to engage in interaction. If we are there for you and we are talking about the values in the constitution, it will become more interesting when you take a part in it and you form an interactive session. This is why earlier we scheduled this particular class on YouTube, and then we change it to Google Meet, just to discuss it in great details, and also so that we may communicate. Because in YouTube, I don't think so. You can talk, you can communicate with the other end, but here we can do so. So let's get that, and also the recording of it will be uploaded on YouTube. So if you have any other engagements, if you have any other time reserved for any other things, you may close the class and watch it on YouTube. There is no issues with that. So now we'll talk about Article 15. Before we go on and talk about Article 15, it is important for us to throw a glimpse on certain cases, certain important cases. I would have quote any other case. But for me, this particular case, National Legal Service Authority, or said Union of India, where the Supreme Court has directed the center and the state government to recognize transgender as the third sex and also to provide the benefit of socially and economically backward class. Right. These two words. Third class is a provision that has been incorporated in the Constitution itself. Third sex is the Constitution, which of course. And if you fill any other government form or any other form, there will be an option: male, female, other gender, or male, female, and particulars of that particular gender, giving them their well-deserved recognition. Socially and educationally backward class. This is positive. By this, the Constitution, the Supreme Court talks about positive discrimination. When you will read Article 15, Clause 1, it says that here is Article 15, Clause 1. Here is Article 15. I am reading this Article 15 for you. I think that it is visible on your end. And please read it or open the Bare Act and read it yourself also. Article 15. Prohibition of discrimination on ground of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. I have underlined this line, this particular word, because they are important, and we will be discussing about that. The state shall not discriminate. Again, negative clause. The state shall not discriminate against any citizen, which means that it's talk about citizen of India, right? On ground of any religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. There has been several interpretations of the word any of them. We'll go through that. No citizen shall, on the ground of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them, be subject to disability, liability, restriction, or condition with regard to access to shops. By shop, what does it mean? Does it mean shops under Article 12? We'll see that. Public restaurants, hotels, and place of public entertainment, or use of wells, tanks, bathing huts, roads, and places of public resort maintained wholly or partly out of state fund or dedicated to the use of general public. Now we understand these two lines. When we see this wholly or partly out of state fund or dedicated to the use of general public. So the provisions in Article 15 applies on Article 12 and also on an organization or a place or an institution which is generally open for everyone. Right. So can the business entities such as Zomato, such as Swiggy, or any other entity like that can discriminate because they are not state, but they are open for everyone? Can they discriminate? Can they say that there are certain classes of society won't deliver food to them, but will deliver food to this particular specific society? No, they cannot, because their services are generally open to everyone. Even if they are a public entity, even if they are a private entity, a private organization, fully funded by private organization, since they are in India, in the territory of India, they cannot discriminate if generally their provisions, their services are open to public in general and not to particular, right? Nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any special provision for women and children. This was there in the Constitution when the Constitution came into being on 26 January 1950. But this provision was not there in the Constitution. It came afterward. Nothing in this article or in clause 2 of Article 29. We'll read that later on in our lecture. shall prevent the state from making any special provision for advancement of any socially and educationally backward class of citizens or for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. This particular provision was inserted in Constitution of India under Article 15 Clause 4 by first Constitutional Amendment Act. So what was such an emergency that first constitutional amendment inserted this particular line? What was such an emergency? This may be the question. First, our first constitutional amendment could have been anything. Why this? And why did the parliament, the then led by Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, so why did they then thought of this provision? We'll talk about it when we'll discuss the case of Champakam Doraraj, right? Which will of course come in the next slide. This particular article 15 in its entirety, talks about protective discrimination. Protective discrimination is generally recognizing that there are certain underprivileged, there are certain downtrodden section of the society, and state shall do certain state shall pass certain law, certain act to help them from their status to the greater status. Right. Now we will talk about the most popular case, State of Madras versus Champakam Doraraju, 1951. Before, if you want, collection of these important cases, which is very much important for competitive exams, you may refer to this book. And in this book, we have discussed all of these cases in very great details. There are also other books written by us, then me and our colleagues, like 100 Landmark Judgment 2018-19, 100 Landmark Judgment 2019, the yearly compilation of it basically. And there is also a book, 100 Landmark Judgment in Criminal Law, talking about the important cases of criminal law. Currently, we are talking about the State of Madras versus Champakam Doraraj. You will be, you will not surprise because this, that this is all an important case. This case has already been asked in UPSC exam. In UPSC exam, it was asked that describe the legal scenario from Champakam Dorarajan to Minerva Mills. We'll of course look to both of the cases. In Champakam Dorarajan, what happened that in Tamil Nadu, when Mrs. Champakam Dorarajan applied for a medical college, she was denied access because of the prevailing reservation in that particular university, and she approached the court, and thereafter the court said that I am going to read it for you. You shall read it from your end also. The Supreme Court, while rejecting the argument of Government of India, ruled that while fundamental right was enforceable, DPSP, directive principle of state policy, were not. And so the law made to implement the DPSP could not take away fundamental rights. The DPSP should conform and run subsidiary to the fundamental rights. The court observed that the DPSP, which by Article 37 are expressly made and unenforceable by a court, cannot override the provision found in Part 3 fundamental right, which, notwithstanding other provisions, are expressly made enforceable by appropriate reads, order, direction under Article 32. You see, what does it actually wants to say? It wants to say that through Article 37, DPSP are not enforceable, but fundamental rights are enforceable, and not only enforceable, that cannot be abridged, that cannot be taken away. So, if the state is using its extraordinary power, we shall not call it extraordinary because this is generally the purpose of the legislature to make the law. So, when state is making the law, to abridge or take away the fundamental rights for implementing this directive principle, Supreme Court says that it could not do so in this particular case. Later, we have this case Minerva Mills versus State of versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court says that Supreme Court overruled the judgment in of Champakam Dorairajan and says that the Supreme Court held that fundamental rights are not an end in themselves but are means to an end. The end is specified in directive principles. It was further observed in the same case that fundamental rights and directive principles together constitute the core commitment to the social revolution, and it together are the conscience of the Constitution. The Indian Constitution is founded on the bedrock of the balance between the two. To give absolute primacy to one over other is to disturb the harmony of the Constitution. This harmony and balance between the fundamental rights and directive principles is a essential feature of the basic structure of the Constitution. Right. So the Supreme Court has mentioned that, of course, directive principles, DPSP, and fundamental rights go hand in hand, and they are complementary to each other. They could be, to implement certain fundamental rights, like we'll see the case of equal pay for equal work. Fundamental right could be amended, and that is not unconstitutional. Right. We have another interesting case relates to Article 15, Clause 4. In this case, what happened that the name of the case is Balaji versus State of Mysore, 1963. This case, what happened there? The government of Mysore wanted to increase the reservation for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, and also to implement, also to come up with a different concept of backward and more backward class based on caste. Why I am writing this? Because this is important when we read the judgment. So there are three facets of this judgment which Supreme Court has seen. First is that there can be no reservation. I'm quoting it again. There can be no reservation based only on caste. It should go through social and economical factor of the society. Only caste cannot be the basis of reservation. So the next thing which we have with us, the next facet of this judgment is in this particular para. I hope you remember that we were talking about certain line where everyone is unequal. Mr. A, Mr. Z, Mr. C, Mr. D. In a society, everyone is not equal, right? And what is this line? This is the line that draws difference between the socially and educationally backward class can be formed on basis of caste, but not only on the basis of caste, right? So if state is, suppose that this line, the average of this line is 6.1. So if the state wants to provide reservation to certain class of society, it shall provide the reservation to the society which is below this average level, much below this average level. Z will qualify for reservation. Z will qualify for other social upliftment programs. D, no. A, no. C, maybe, may not be. That depends upon that. What if you talk about this, and if you talk about OBC, not everyone is backward in OBC class. I hope you know that. This is so. If we talk about this section of society, this section of society should be actually given reservation for the social upliftment. So that is another concept. Here, Z will qualify for reservation, right? This is what Supreme Court has said in this particular para. And since the reservation was provided to Lengyap, which was above the state average, 6.1 was the average. 7.1 was the marks of Lingard. So the reservation provided to them becomes unconstitutional. Third is that, see, reservation is always provided on the percentage basis. There could be 13% for a particular community. There could be 27% for a particular community. There could be 10% for a particular community. But in its entirety, maximum can be only 100%. What is more? What can be more than 100%? Nothing, because it has to be in 100%. So the total limit of reservation should be in 15%, 50%. Howsoever backward class is, howsoever downtrodden section of society is, this should be the limit. This should be the limit of reservation for the social upliftment, and state cannot encroach in this 50%, which is for any class, not only the general, but any class of society can, if they grow up and get the marks or get their qualification much above the average, they will be evaluated on the general basis. But the limit of the reservation shall be in this 50%, right? So this is all this judgment talks about. And of course, it says that no concept can be very strict, that it cannot be, if there is a law and it is very strict in nature, then what will happen that it will be removed in time. The Supreme Court says that the state had to approach its task objectively and in a very rational manner, right? Am I clear? Everyone is getting the concept?
Yes, sir.
Everyone?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. So yes, we'll be talking about one more judgment, and this has been very controversial judgment. This has also been very popular judgment, and this is very core to the integrity of women. I hope you understood. You have already understood what we are talking about. We are talking about Sabrimala case. The details of this case has already been mentioned in this book written by me and my co-author Rishabh Kesavani in 2018 itself. I think the judgment came in August 2018. I don't remember. So okay, September 2018. Here's the date. All right. So when we'll talk about Sabrimala case, I'm assuming that even if there is a person, even if there are some person from Kerala, and even if they are follower of Ayyappa, Lord Ayyappa, you shall not outrage. You shall be bound within your discipline, and the objective of this class is just to provide you the knowledge, and not for this is not a platform for outrageous discussion. Of course, we can discuss on it. I would love to discuss on the parameters of this judgment, but outside it, the aggressive discussion is not allowed. And if it involves blocking me or leaving the class, that is your wish. So yes, when we talk about this judgment, this was very, this was very highlighted, and this was it has very, it was very violent. The state was in the violent. I think that it was emergency, or section 144 of CRPC was about to implement over there. So what happened that Sabrimala temple, in Sabrimala temple, there is a statue of Lord Ayyappa. So there was a statue of Lord Ayyappa. Since Lord Ayyappa, see what happens that Do you know the concept of legal person? Legal person. I, me, and you are citizen of India, and we are person in general. What is legal person? Into legal world is a company, right? You can sue on into legal world, and into legal world can sue on you. SUE wala C. So it can sue on you, and you can sue vice versa. Into legal world is a legal person. When we talk about certain statue or certain monuments or certain place, they can also be a legal person. Given that they have certain identity, they have certain uniqueness, and they have certain characteristics. The characteristics is important and have been have been a part of custom, or is well known, and someone, either government or citizen or the belong or the devotee, wants to protect that particular characters of that particular statues or place or whatsoever. So we are talking about Lord Ayappa. So the believer of Lord Ayappa believes that Lord Ayappa is a celibate. Celibate means one who has abandoned what we call in Hindi we call sant. Those who have left the worldly pleasure and belongs to spiritual class. So they are sent, and Lord Ayappa he was believed to be a celibate, and he draws its power being celibate, which means being away from women of any class. Later, government of Kerala came with this law that women from 10 to 50 year of age group, sorry, there is no place to write. So 10 to 50 year of age group shall not enter temple. They are prohibited from entering the temple. Why? Because there is a statue of Lord Ayappa, and Lord Ayappa was believed to be celibate. So the argument from petitioner, who is young in Indian Young Association, Indian Young Lawyers Association versus State of Kerala, they argues that since women from 10 to 50 year of age group, women between 10 to 50 year of age group are restricted from entering Sabrimala temple, the law in its entirety is violative of Article 14, 15, 17 and 25. So 14 we have already seen. It talks about equality. 15 it talks about no discrimination. 17 talks about untouchability, and 25 talks about right to practice, profess, and propagate one's religion. Right. Second argument was that if Lord Appa is a Hindu temple, so in Hindu there is no provisions that women shall be discriminated based on these factors, and that is not the concept existent in Hindu philosophy. So the entire concept of Lord Appa not allowing entry of women is unconstitutional. Third was that during the Travancore king, women were allowed. There are evidences that women were allowed. They were allowed to come and pray over there. So if prohibiting women from entering the temple was a custom, how come they were allowed in during this duration? And if they were allowed during this duration, then it's not custom, because custom is something that has been followed throughout the year, right? So it is not the custom. Since it is not custom, it could not be followed. And also, Rule 3, laid down by Kerala Hindu Places of Public Worship, authorization of entry rules, is violative of a fundamental right under Article 25 of freedom to practice one's religion. Why? Because one, see, this is Hindu temple, No, this cannot be. Yes, this could be. So Hindu temple doesn't prohibit anyone from entering in its campus, and if it is maintained by state fund, of course, if it is maintained by a state fund, it comes under Article 25, right? If it comes under Article 25, no one can prohibit certain class and section of society to enter the temple, right? But under Rule 3, laid down by Kerala Hindu places of public worship, women from age group of 10 to 50 were prohibited. Thus, the entire law was violative of fundamental right and becomes unconstitutional. The followers of Lord Ayappa, they argumented that since there is a statue of Lord Ayappa in the Sabrimala temple, and Lord Ayappa is a celibate, any women entering the temple between the age group of 10 to 50 will be against their belief. And since since Lord Ayappa is a legal person, right? Since Lord Ayappa is a legal person and comes under the meaning of Article 26, which means that the temple shall be granted the status of religious dominion, and thus Article 15 Clause 2 does not apply. Let's see what is there in Article 15 Clause 2. So Article 15 Clause 2 says that no citizen shall, on ground only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them, be subject to any disability, liability, restriction, or condition with regard to access to shops, public restaurants, hotel, places of public entertainment, use of wells, tanks, bathing ghats, roads, and place of public resort, maintained wholly or partly out of state fund or dedicated to the use of general public, right? So if there is a place which is dedicated for the use of general public, it should be open for all, and if it is not, it should be violative of Article 15 Clause 2. But if that particular place has was granted the status of religious dominion, what this word religious dominion mean? See, if certain community or certain class of person believe in certain certain community or class of person believe in certain thing, and the identity of that particular temple or that particular deity or that particular place of worship is unique, different, and has been followed throughout the time, that particular place will be granted the status of religious denominations, right? That particular place will be granted the status of religious denomination, and once they are granted the rights of religious denomination, state could not interfere. State could not interfere in the happening of whatever happening in this particular place. Of course, that should not be against the provision that has already been mentioned in the IPC. That will not be criminal provisions. But yes, state shall not interfere. First thing, and second thing, Article 15, Clause 2 does not apply on religious denomination. Understood? This was the argument by respondent. What Supreme Court says is that I'll be reading this entire judgment of Supreme Court for you. It's not that long, and if it is visible on your side, do read. A 5-judge constitutional bench by a majority of 4:1 held not allowing entry to women of age group of 10 to 50 years in the Sabrimala temple is unconstitutional. It held that the practice violated the fundamental rights to equality, liberty, freedom of religion under Article 14, 15, 19, Clause 1, 21 and 25, Clause 1. It struck down Rule 3B of the Kerala Hindu Place of Public Worship Act as unconstitutional. Rule 3B allowed for Hindu denomination to exclude women from public places of worship if the exclusion is based on custom. Patriarchy of religion cannot be permitted to triumph over faith. Biological or psychological reason cannot be accepted in the freedom for faith. Religion is basically a way of life, however, certain practices create incongruities. The dissenting opinion in the case was delivered by Justice Indu Malhotra and rest we know. So this is what Supreme Court said, that the argument of respondent and the followers thereupon, the Act of Kerala, Rule 3B of Kerala, all of these are unconstitutional. Right? Now we have before us Article 16. So our aim is to study until Article 18. But this is 7:30. Again, I want your approval to go ahead. Shall we go ahead or close the session? Shall we go ahead? Yes, no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. I hope you are not finding it boring.
No, sir.
Right. Thank you. That is a great compliment. That is, of course, a great compliment to me. And thank you for your response. So,
So you are inaudible.
Sir, your mic got mute, sir.
So you are inaudible.
Sir, you are not audible, sir.
am I audible to everyone?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Now, sir.
All right. I was informed by team that I am not audible.
Yes, you are audible, sir.
Not, but now you are.
Now I'm audible, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are.
All right, all right. Thank you. So here we are.
Sir, again you are inaudible.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm unable to understand. Am I audible or not?
Yes, sir,
The
you're
team is saying
audible.
that the
Yes, sir.
team is
You
saying
are.
I'm not.
You are. You are, sir.
All right. The team is saying that when I'm opening the PPT, I'm not audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Let me do a thing. Am I audible now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Great, great. That is a great relief. So yes, we are talking about different. We were talking about yes. So there was a school which classified teacher into technical and non-technical group, right? So if you are art student, you may relate to it. That apart from social injustice and social inequalities, apart from economical inequalities, there is another inequality in society, which is students of art inequalities. I don't know why in India students of arts are discriminated against a student who goes for bio or maths or what. But in the foreign nation, even in Oxford, you'll see the different scenario. This is where creativity lies. So leave it apart. What point I want to make here is that the teacher which belongs to technical background were given higher salary, right? Now you can relate. The art was inferior subject, at least from the perspective of society or from the perspective of competitive exams. And non-technical teaching classes were inferior, right? So the technical class of teachers were given higher salary, and non-technical were given lower salary. Mr. Pramod Bhatia couldn't digest this and filed.
Sir, you are not audible.
I think, hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
I think there is some technical fault in the network, and that is why the team is messaging me again and again that I'm not audible at certain point. So I think that we shall end this class here for now, and we'll again start the class on next Friday with the leftover portion. I think only there is few, there was very few portion in the slide that was left. It would have taken another half an hour, but yes, if the team is saying so, let's in this class for today, and we'll again begin from here only, and we'll go on to explain Article 19 as well. So if you like the class, do share the video. The video will be uploaded on the YouTube, and we will be provided with the link. Do share the link. That will be of great help to me. And whosoever is watching on the YouTube, do share it. And of course, come back again on Friday. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Anisa. Thank you. Thank you, Tamanna. Thank you, Mohammed Junaid. Thank you. Thank you, Anurag Mishra. Thank you, Shalini. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Diksha. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Swati. Thank you, Akash. Okay, Tata. Take care. Bye. Jai Hind.